Should I tell you that my last name is misspelled on the thingy?
Yes, you are able to change your name, or
Oh,
I can try to change it for you. It should have 2 G's, correct?
Yeah, let's see. Boop, boop, boop. Rename. But that means I can say anything.
Well, true. All right, so we are live on Facebook. We are live here. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself for now, but my understanding is Jamie will start us off. We'll have a little conversation, and I have the questions that I will be reading on behalf of our participants. So I do see some people have dropped some comments in the chat, but if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, and I will be monitoring there. So I'll turn it over to you, Jamie.
Okay, thank you, Jax. So howdy, folks. Welcome, everybody, to the Texas NORML March 2021 monthly meeting. Normally at Flamingo Cantina, and we hope that maybe someday soon it'll be there again. We appreciate everything they've done for us. We're, of course, doing this by Zoom, Facebook Live, and all those sorts of things. As Jack said, my name is Jamie Spencer. I'm legal counsel for Texas NORML. Tonight's focus in terms of the meeting and some of the speakers is going to be on concentrates, but there are also some other items on tonight's agenda, so let's talk about that. It is lawyer night. It's going to be me and a couple of returning guests, Kelly Higgins, a criminal defense lawyer, and Mykal Fox, also a criminal defense lawyer here, both locally. We are going to have a few prepared remarks for y'all tonight. But we also ask that you submit questions in chat. Jack's referenced that, where you're going to have some Q&As. If you have some questions for us, we'll take a stab at them maybe halfway through or near the end. Also, Jax is going to give a legislative update as well, kind of let us know what's going on with the current legislature. So that's going to be really interesting. So to the cannabis and the concentrates portion of tonight's program, let me start with a little bit of a too long didn't read version. And that is that a lot of what we're going to be talking about in terms of what the current law is really basic and simple. Texas has for a long time made a distinction between flower marijuana, FLWER marijuana, and essentially everything else that is taking that flower marijuana and converting it, distilling it, making it a concentrate, doing anything to it other than just using it, consuming it in the original plant form, fell under category number 2. That started as a felony. That's going to be true for pretty much what we're talking about here tonight. So there is now a third category, and that is because the hemp regulations that made hemp legal here in Texas, along with the federal farm bill, carved out another definition of something that is the cannabis plant. That is, if it's 0.3% THC by weight, whatever that means, and that's difficult to measure, that is a third category. So I mean, right now, of course, the flower is illegal in Texas and the everything else category is illegal as well. And what we're going to be talking about tonight in terms of concentrates, those are punished more harshly. They're going to start at the felony level. So concentrates, what are we talking about? Interestingly, when I started taking a look at different states' laws, definitions are sort of all over the place. I'm talking about going out and doing a little bit of research about what other states have done that have expanded beyond just allowing legal flower marijuana. So those definitions don't really, when there's multiple definitions for something, that doesn't necessarily tell you what it is. So the dictionary or scientific definition is, when we're talking about cannabis, is substances in which some parts of that cannabis plant, namely the cannabinoids and the terpenes, have been isolated while removing excess plant material and other impurities. And concentrates come in a variety of formats and textures. The non-active forms of the concentrate need to be heated for the user to experience their effects, but the concentrates with active cannabinoids, usually distillates, or ones that are infused into edibles, tinctures, and tropicals can provide those effects without the application of heat. And if you have had the experience, of course, of being in another state where it is legal and actually seeing or holding or observing real life marijuana flower in front of you, you've probably noticed that there are tiny hairs that are covering the cannabis plant, giving it sort of a crystal shininess and sometimes a sticky feel. Well, those glandular hairs or trichomes produce and hold the plant's cannabinoids and terpenes. And cannabis concentrates isolate and accumulate those compounds from the plant's trichome glands. So I can hear the people on Facebook saying, hey, it sounds like they're guaranteed to be more potent than flower. And that's correct. And I want to take a really quick sidetrack and address that. The reason I want to address that is very typically the start of a pro-drug warrior's attempt at trying to justify the differences in penalties between marijuana and things that are other than marijuana that may have a higher concentration or be more potent than just the flower marijuana, right? We've seen this for decades. In some ways, because the drug war has been going on for 50 years and because the parental generations now were kids are not even born when it was started, the misinformation has to continue in a this is not your father's marijuana kind of way. Well, think about alcohol. If somebody drinks a 6-pack of beer to get to whatever level of intoxication, if that does intoxicate them, that's 72 ounces of beer. Now, that person would never drink 72 ounces of vodka to get, to the same level, right? So when we're talking about whether or not concentrates are more potent, the answer is yes. That's not necessarily a reason to make super huge, harsh policy decisions based on that. And never forget, 0 marijuana deaths versus countless alcohol deaths. I don't even know how to incalculable. So now a lot of the things that I was talking about just then kind of deal with the aesthetics, not necessarily, I mean, how it, if there are different textures or it feels a different way, that's not necessarily going to have different effects or different flavor or different potency. But concentrates are more bioavailable. And so bioavailability is just a subcategory of absorption, and it is the fraction or percentage of an administered drug that reaches the system's circulation. And concentrates do have a high bioavailability, meaning that to some extent, it's easier to use doses of something when, if a physician is going to prescribe it, if they're allowed, if they know, a shorter range for when that dosage might take effect for the patient. The last thing I'm going to do before turning it over to our first speaker is just talk about there are 2 different main extraction types for concentrates. One of them is to physically separate the trichomes that we were talking about from the plant. And the other one is to use liquid solvents. So for physical separation, the glands are removed. It can be from literally physical handshaking or machines doing that, but it is literally a physical action that's done to that plant. That is opposed to the liquid solvent extraction way, which is always going to use the same basic workflow. A liquid solvent is used to separate the active compounds from the trichome gland and to yield a solution. This can then be further refined until the desired compounds that the person is looking for remains. So those are some basics about what concentrates are. I would have done well to have gotten CVs from my guests, but I'm just gonna start with introducing Mykal Fox. I should know how long he has been a lawyer. We have tried cases together, for example. That's always sort of a bonding experience between criminal defense lawyers. And he is here to talk to us tonight, and I appreciate him being here. Jax, I think maybe you probably have the power to turn it over to him, or I guess, Mykal, can you just turn on? I'm going to mute myself now.
I can unmute myself, and 10 years practicing. Thanks, Jamie, for having me back. I always, whenever I come and speak, I always tell everybody that everything I'm going to say, Jamie just doesn't want to say it all. He knows all this stuff probably better than most of us, but I always appreciate the opportunity to take part in something that I'm a member of and believe in. But yeah, pop up the questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Jax, thank you as well for having us. She had sent hit on in a little bit and pass it to Kelly and see what he has to say about them as well. One of the things also obviously on concentrates that I have been talking about with colleagues and friends, and also being a co-owner of a CBD company, is looking at how this new definition of hemp, and I know some of the questions talk about this as well, with regard to the CBD and people carrying concentrates with them, and how a company or the vape store can sell these concentrate cartridges that they show you the laboratory print off is there in the store, showing you that the THC is less than the 0.3%. I've gone in and purchased these myself. And whenever the first time I went in myself, I took a picture of the lab that shows that the product that I was buying had less than 0.3%. And it talks about one of the questions asks about like carrying edibles or any type of concentrates in the package that you purchase it in. Well, presumably if it's a legal concentrate that you're buying here in Texas, then, I bought it in a box that said what it was, that it was CBD, and I had the print off on my phone. I actually also bought some CBD flour, some hemp flour, brought it up to the courthouse, and a lot of the prosecutors and judges were miffed. That I brought something that looked like weed into the courthouse. One of the judges, had me do a little presentation. They brought in the appellate division of the Travis County District Attorney's Office as well, and they all touched it and smelled it. One particular prosecutor, after holding the little bottle that had an eighth of the hemp flour in it, straight up took it and rubbed it off on her shirt. I guess presumably to take her fingerprints off of it. So, I think it's new to everybody. I've talked about this once before, I think maybe pre-COVID, the practical, what we deal with on an everyday basis in Travis County is that they're, not prosecuting marijuana cases. They're not prosecuting low level concentrate cases. And even more than low level, I've had, third degree concentrate, what would be a concentrate third degree case, and they're not taking the time to test it. I talked to an ADA higher up in the at the DA's office, and the way he explained it to me, that it wasn't worth the amount of money or time. They were backed up specifically here in Austin. They have the machine to test it, but it takes several months and a bunch of money to recalibrate that machine in order to test these types of, to quantify THC in concentrates and or flour. And so they were more concerned with testing K2 and synthetic, other types of synthetic drugs that were a bigger problem. We were talking about specifically in the downtown area where there's issues. And so they were more focused on prosecuting those types of cases than they were, low level marijuana, where people were saying, you can't prove that there's 0.3 THC plus in it. So if you're gonna buy the legal and this is now codified in the Health and Safety Code. It's section It's in the 440s of the Health and Safety Code. I actually printed off section 443.202, the regulation of certain cannabinoid oils. And it talks about whether or not it's illegal to possess a cartridge that has a CBD concentrate in it. And somebody, I think, asked how I had this, or, how can they prosecute me for this? Well, what they're doing, like I said, in Austin and Travis County is, they'll take it. And if that's the only thing, you may not be arrested. In Bastrop, where I also practice, I know that if you get stopped at something and you tell the officer when you get pulled over, officer, it's CBD, I purchased it at a local vape store, what they'll do is they'll seize that from you. And then they will hold on to it. And after a conversation with the district attorney there, I was told that they would be testing all of those cartridges at some point down the line. I got 3 years under the statute if it is something that would be prosecutable as a felony. That's the statute of limitations. And that they were going to test it and then they would issue warrants later. That's Bastrop. Travis County, they're, just either seizing it, leaving you with it. I've had clients arrested or, stopped, and those products aren't even taken from them. As an attorney, I can't tell you to lie to the police. But my clients who have, in my experience, said, oh, I have a THC pen, or I have THC oil, or when asked, yes, it's got marijuana in it. They seize it. I haven't seen those prosecutions lately. Folks that truthfully or otherwise say that it's CBD and they legally purchased it, or say nothing. I haven't seen even those arrests with just a cartridge of supposed concentrate of whatever might be in there. So, and this statute that I read, 443.202, specifically lists out, that it's legal to possess under these certain rules of the statute. And it's like, can't contain, harmful ingredients. And it's a lot of the statutes written more for the people that are selling it. But as long as you ideally purchase it from one of those places and have the box and the print off showing that it has the 0.3% or less, I don't think that there's probable cause to arrest you for possession of a controlled substance. Now, officers can include things like his eyes were red, he was acting nervous, I didn't believe him for whatever reason, and they can try to make probable causes to those things and then test the product. One other thing I will say about the concentrates that I've been looking into lately, that's somewhat related to another question, which deals with Delta 8, which I find to be interesting because it's legal in Texas as of right now. And why I say as of right now, I recently read that even the DEA is looking into, using the rulemaking authority under the Agriculture Improvement Act to try to make these synthetically derived tetrahydrocannabinols illegal. And that's based on the fact that Delta 8 doesn't really exist in too many cannabis sativa plants. And so most of what you're seeing with regard to Delta 8 is this creation almost of it and a synthesized extraction, and then they're putting it back on like the hemp flower, or putting it in some other type of, extracting it and then mixing it with, coconut oil or some other type of oil, but it's actually synthetically derived. And so the rules don't quite cover that right now. And so that's an interesting thing about Delta 8, that technically it's legal. But the other part that's maybe even more interesting when it comes to the cross section with the law is that when they test this product, they're using gas chromatography flame ionization, which basically heats up all of the different parts of the plant. And I can go into a little bit more of the science of it if I'm prompted, but the idea is that because the definition under federal regulations, and it's similar in Texas because we copied some of the federal law with regard to the hemp law, but that the they're looking at the total potential THC. And so when they heat it up, even though it's being sold at 0.3% or less than 0.3% with Delta 8 or some combination or even separated Delta 8 and or hemp flower, when they heat up the product, they're actually increasing the amount of total THC, because THCA, which I know many of you are familiar with, which is the it's the acid, it's the that it's separate from THC, but it's the acid precursor. And so when you heat it up, it actually increases. And there's a formula that they use. They multiply it times a fraction, but they add that plus the THC that's already in there, and then your number could go up over the 0.3%. And so if they were to quantify it, you could feasibly be prosecuted for possessing a concentrate that would be illegal based on its percentage of THC, though as it's sold would not be illegal. And so I find that to be an interesting fact. And as opposed to ramble on about the science of it, which I could, if there's some more questions, I will pass to Kelly and see what he has to say on the matter.
There was if I'm audible, there was a chat question wanting you to repeat that health and safety code statute 422.
443.202. The title of it is Regulation on Certain Cannabinoid Oils. And that whole section is good to read if you're going to be, either one, starting a CBD business of some sort, because they have a bunch of new regs and stuff that they're creating in there. And then specifically possessing anything that you purchase at one of these vape shops, to get, having that box is good. Having the print off that I told you, or I saved it on my phone, is also good.
Okay, now I'm going to just start talking then. My name's Kelly Higgins. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I work pretty exclusively in Hayes County. That's San Marcos, Kyle, Buda, Dripping Springs, Wimberley. Anyway, we have a separate DA from Travis County, and I was really happy to hear what was going on in Travis County. Sounds like they've made the right economic analysis. We are not doing that here. Every marijuana case is being prosecuted by our DA. The practicalities of that are that if you get caught with flour at the misdemeanor level, up to 2 ounces of Class B, up to 4 ounces of Class A, they'll file a case on you, make you come to court. You'll have to lawyer up. But in the end, you set that case for trial, they'll dismiss it the day of trial. They're really just going to procedurally torment people, but they will not present a case to a jury. And that's the policy of our DA right now. As to distillates, the oils, all the edibles, the vaporizer stuff, all of that, that is definitely prosecuted at the felony level. Our DA will send even an empty cartridge away to the DPS lab for analysis and wait 10 to 12 months for an answer, and then prosecute it at the appropriate felony level, sometimes state jail, sometimes third degree. And there is no sense in the DA's office that they shouldn't be doing that. They do want to spend the money on that lab work. It's almost hard done. I mean, it's frustrating. I'll say that. The sense of it all is that you would just let those go, and as in Travis County, focus on more destructive drugs. But here, our cops just really will arrest anybody, anytime, and they will take a case all the way. Okay, having said all that, as to those felony cases, very routinely here, they'll try to induce you to plead to a misdemeanor marijuana case to dismiss that. Most people want to do that because a felony is too much. You can't vote. It changes your life forever. And I'll leave that as Hayes County update. I did want to talk a little bit about Delta 8. I looked at the statutes and I didn't write them down in advance, but I looked at them a few months ago when I first saw Delta 8 in a package on the counter in a little shop. And the girl behind the counter told me, yep, that's legal. Yep, it's got Delta 8 THC. I had never heard of it. So I bought some and I went and looked at the statutes. And the formulation I was able to make is, it is legal because it is a derivative of the hemp plant that does not contain greater than 3%, 0.3% Delta 9 THC. So Mykal was way more, he grokked the chemistry of it way better than I do. I needed a rhetorical device to let me know why it was legal. But we balanced that against section 19 of the POCS statute, which allows them to prosecute analogs. And I know for sure that if you tried to make the distinction in a Hayes County court that it was Delta 8, not Delta 9, if you didn't get relief from the judge on that point, the DA would very definitely assert that that was a derivative under the catch-all for analogs. And, you know, I kind of believe our judges would allow that to happen, to go forward. So I don't know that Delta 8 is as safe as all that, given that there's a catch-all for analogs to all kinds of different controlled substances, right? So if you're a chemist and meth is illegal and you make the next thing to meth and they haven't named it yet, this is the statute that allows them to prosecute it as if it were meth. And I kind of believe, at least in my county, obviously Travis County wouldn't bother, but I believe in my county, they would go forward with a prosecution. What else do I want to say? I wanted to make the distinction about these distillates and stuff, that they are categorized as felonies by weight. So a brownie is way more trouble than a cartridge, right? So anyway, just a little thing that popped into my head. Boom, 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 boom.
Well, hey Kelly, if I can piggyback on that real quick, a little bit of the
Please.
science.
I don't know what
My dad is a forensic toxicologist and testifies, so I have him in my left ear. I actually, if I can do this real quick, since we're still on the D8, I hope this works. Let me see if it will. I don't know if it'll let me do it, guys. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
You have permission to share screen.
Okay, cool. So can you got Kelly, you can see this?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So my dad actually sent me these, and that's his little picture up in the top left-hand corner. So here's some information that hopefully everybody can kind of see and read. And it was something I was going to mention about the Delta 8. I always like a good, layman's explanation and understanding, because that's what we do, is explain it to folks like that. I get to listen to my dad talk about this stuff in this way. But the thing that I will say that you are right about that I didn't point out is, if it is extracted, if Delta 8 feasibly was, and this is kind of what I think the DEA is getting at, if Delta 8 is extracted from the marijuana plant, then technically it would still be illegal based on the fact that I guess it comes from the marijuana plant. What they're talking about, this DEA, at least as far as I can tell, and I'm still learning, they're claiming is that it's an extraction from a hemp plant. Or a CBD plant. And so that's, I guess, how at least the argument would be in Texas, that they're keeping it legal. But we didn't really talk about this, but the easy part that my dad pointed out here is that Delta 8 THC is kind of the medium, the light, high light, as or what I read, they called it weed light. So it has about 50% of the high effects, lacks the paranoia and anxiety. Not as intoxicated, doesn't last as long. Interesting that like I said, a lot of folks are seeing that it's been sprayed on to things, as opposed to, a actual Delta 8 creation, a plant in and of itself, the hemp plant, because it's not found, in nature, so to speak. So I guess what I read here from what the DEA is saying, and I think actually a name that Jax probably knows better than I in the mix, but a gentleman, Holscher, talks about, and he works with the national NORML, and he was talking about the how to correctly establish in scientific a sample of DEA, how it was sourced. And so the Department of Justice and the DEA are trying to figure out how to prosecute these cases based on, I guess, how manufacturers are ultimately producing wholesale versions of this Delta 8. And so that's what, because it only exists in such small fractions in hemp plants. And so he's saying that the process by which it's extracted is even federally banned, because it is covered under their previous, I guess, rulemaking authority under this Agricultural Improvement Act, which is why the DEA said that the synthetically derived, they don't have control of and they can't prosecute yet. So they're trying to figure out a way to do that, of course. But as of right now, they don't. They don't have a way to, I guess, show the process by which it was extracted. So that's, I found that to be interesting, that they're trying to figure out that particular method so that they can figure out a way to prosecute this new Delta 8 that could be pulled from an illegal source, I guess is what they're saying. That's how, as far as I understand it.
Mykal, before you change that screen, let me jump in and comment whenever you're done.
Please, I'm done.
Okay. So I too have been hearing about Delta 8, and I had an extremely similar reaction to what Kelly was talking about. We've pretty much all handled these analog cases. There are, in, I guess, street terms, they're called designer drugs, but basically there'll be some complicated chemical formula that is made illegal by either the Federal Controlled Substances Act or a state's Controlled Substances Act. And they can, it's a situation where that compound can be synthetically changed slightly so that it no longer has the same chemical formula, and that is meant to be a defense. So actually, as far back as 1986, the United States federally passed the Federal Analog Act, and what it did is it banned the production of any chemical analog of a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 controlled substance that has, and I'm not sure of the exact language, but this is close, substantially similar pharmacological effects with the intent of human consumption. I guess my first comment on that would be that how many legal drugs, prescription medications, claim to have the same effects through human consumption as what medical marijuana patients already know it does, right? What a silly definition that would be. But what I kind of want to do here is actually have a little bit of a criminal defense lawyer conference about an idea I have. And I'm happy to include the audience if they have comments about this as well, or if there are other lawyers out there that, want to get back to me about it. In these analog cases, I've always thought potentially that there is a defense, and hear me out. I'm gonna use an analogy here. Let's pretend that Mykal and Jamie are arrested together in the same incident, and we're passengers in a car, and Mykal has a bag of some sort of controlled substance on him, and Jamie has a bag of some sort of controlled substance on him, and they're individually prosecuted for these cases. And the drugs are sent to a lab, and one of them comes back as methamphetamine, the other one comes back as cocaine or whatever. At any rate, at least something that, let's just say it's something that also physically looks similar, right? But they're different substances. But the chemist comes into court, or obviously he's telling the prosecutor this beforehand, and says, look, there was a mix-up, and I am not sure which one is which. I absolutely know 100% that Mykal either possessed the amphetamine or he possessed the cocaine, and the same for Jamie, but I'm not sure which it is. My argument would be that even if there were two trials, or even if the cases were prosecuted together, that the 50-ish% chance that it was a different drug that I possessed in each case should be way more than enough for beyond a reasonable doubt not the state being unable to prove which substance it was that I possessed. And I think potentially if it ever came down to it, and hopefully it doesn't, hopefully we get, you know, some more sane laws pretty soon. But I think similar arguments could be made in a Delta 9 versus Delta 8 case. In other words, is my client being prosecuted for Delta 9? Or even if you can make an argument that Delta 8 is illegal, it's still potentially problematic, because my understanding is that it is not necessarily easy to test for the differences. At any rate, throwing that back out there to see if either of y'all have a comment on those thoughts.
I have, I mean, that strikes a couple of chords with me. First, I think it's really, I just want to comment broadly, war on drugs style, that we're dealing with a moral crusade here. The prohibition since Nixon has been a moral crusade, and more specifically, a very cynical racist crusade and class crusade. All right. But reason that matters here is we're quibbling about chemistry in the context of a moral crusade. And when I look at a trial, and you know, these cases, I haven't had one go to trial in a million years. They fall apart or someone pleads. But when I think of them, I don't think of them in terms of, let me go in there and prove through science that they have the wrong guy, right? For me, it's much more a moral argument. Maybe it's good that I'm not trying it on those terms a lot, but I don't think a jury is going to make a verdict based on the competing scientific chemical analysis arguments of the defense and the state. I think they're either inclined to convict or acquit based on their attitudes and about the moral crusade, right? And that at the end of the day, fighting this is a bigger picture of convincing more people where they should stand on it. And I'm sorry to depart so far from the law, but I just had that kicking in my head since the quibbling about lab analysis.
Right.
And we're really down to that. Statutes have to be written so that they comport with the expected laboratory analysis of the stuff we want to put people in jail for. It's not a question of we know a lot about chemistry and we know that these chemicals will hurt people. It's we know who we want to put in jail. So give us some statutory language that will allow a chemist to help us put them in jail. Sorry, that's my moral outrage portion for right now.
Well, and it's not just moral outrage. You said that it was a diversion from the legal arguments, but it's not, right? I mean, first off, those are good, talking points in terms of, lobbying the legislature, but also you're talking about trial strategies and what works and what doesn't. And all of this is very important. It is absolutely absurd that people that went to law school that became, appellate judges are pretending to know these things.
No shit.
I mean, really, it is the definition of absurdity. Unfortunately, because we are on this moral crusade, I mean, every defense lawyer I know basically kind of loves going to jury trial on drug cases, maybe more than most others, because at least you're in the right. And I do think that, to the extent that you try to make it a moral crusade in front of a jury and a prosecutor tries to shut you down through, trying to convert that into some sort of jury nullification and saying that, I don't want to go down that road, but I could see prosecutors trying to reach out to block that sort of thing. Sort of the beauty of us discussing some of the chemical arguments that we can make, what I look at it as is, I think we've all had juries who said, whether it was this type of case or not, Jamie, I didn't really want to convict your client, but, and I don't necessarily agree with this type of law, but the judge said, is A true? Is B true? Is C true? And the answer was yes, yes, yes. So I felt like the judge made me check mark that guilty instead of the not guilty. And I totally get that. I'm not making fun of jurors for feeling that way, right? What I'm hoping for sometimes is to give them something to hang their hat on. You know, if they're, I agree with you that if
Yeah,
they
no,
think
I
that
mean,
it's the devil's weed, then they're doing your client a favor by convicting him. So you're probably not going to reach those people anyway.
Jamie, in your example, were you saying that, like, for your hypothetical is meth and coke, and he says I might have switched them basically. If we were to move that over, are we talking about, you're saying maybe Delta 8 versus Delta 9 to be more specific in our instance? I mean, if Delta 8's legal and he said, because I feel like, you know, trying to think about it in the sense of, you know, what we're actually talking about, not the analogy makes sense, but you know, D8 being legal now versus Delta 9. So, you know, obviously they're not going to get beyond a reasonable doubt if the guy comes back and says, well, one of them had Delta 8, one of them had Delta 9. I don't know which one, right? They're not going to win that trial. If they make Delta 8 illegal, and maybe in that situation, is that what you were maybe alluding to, where there's one Delta 8 versus one Delta 9 and you don't know which one, but they're both illegal? Same type of analogy?
So I guess I'm talking about it. Well, first off, I am unfamiliar with how much gas chromatography can distinguish Delta 8 from Delta 9 in the first place. But assuming that there may be some way of trying to conflate those issues for a jury, then again, it's just one of those sort of desperate, you know, you can look at it as a last straw, but it's also what I just talked about potentially, which is giving the jurors some reason that if I can correctly pronounce multisyllabic chemical sounding words all in a row and make what's, you know, otherwise seems like a reasonable argument, throw a little bit of that moral outrage that Kelly was talking about in there as well, where it's appropriate, just kind of talking about that as an overall strategy. But, you know, I have had, I guess the real life analogy was during COVID, I had, not in Travis County and not, I'm just saying not in Hayes or Williamson. I had a misdemeanor marijuana case where I was starting to bring up the hemp situation in terms of not being able to prove 0.3% by weight and all this kind of stuff. And it was a county where they didn't care about such things. And, you know, then the threat was, well, then we can just prosecute him under the Class B misdemeanor for not having a hemp license. So I took that opportunity to talk with that prosecutor. You can see that's sort of a similar thing too, right? If they don't know if it's marijuana by the Texas statute definition, or they don't know whether it's hemp by the Texas statute definition, and they know my client possessed it, and if he possessed it one way, he did it without a license, and that's a crime. But if it was a different substance, he committed a different crime. In theory, I mean, I believe that should be a directed verdict. I'm not saying I would have gotten a directed verdict from that judge, and you know, it worked out in different ways, and it didn't. This one didn't go to trial. But yes, it's in these analog cases, when I get the analog case itself, and I mean, I'm not sure I've had more than 3 or 4 analog cases in 20 plus years of doing this. I pretty much have to go seek somebody with, you know, I took chemistry 101 30 plus years ago, and that doesn't cut it. So yeah, I mean, it requires me consulting somebody that actually knows what they're talking about.
Can I jump back to some, we were talking, I'm sorry, I don't want to break the chain, but there was something I made a note that I wanted to talk about. Mykal mentioned trying to explain to an officer what it was you had, or maybe even possibly not under legal advice, misrepresenting what it was you had. But I want to just go back for people that are listening and, you know, that may have contraband on them from time to time. I just want to go back to the defense lawyer's basic fundamental commandment number 1. You don't talk at all. What you do say, right or wrong, whether you're right, whether it's misunderstood, it'll be presented to a jury. And I still just rely on the old saw, especially in an age where I think policing is declining in quality pretty starkly. You just can't win in the field. If a cop wants to arrest you, remember, it's about who, not what. And if a cop wants to arrest you, he's going to arrest you no matter what you said. If you didn't open your mouth, there's nothing to hold against you. Now it's all chemistry. So, you know, just to the old saw, you can't win in the field, but you can win in court if you play correctly in the field. So I'm not trying to gainsay what Mykal said. Maybe you could talk your way out of it. You know, your mileage may vary, but the standard operating procedure ought to be, am I free to go? My lawyer
One of
told
the
me not to answer that
questions
question.
actually had to do with, Mykal had kind of given advice on if you're carrying a hemp product on you and, do you keep the packaging, which was some of the questions, right? But then someone asked, like, what if can I say, I don't know what it is?
I think the no answer is better than I don't know what it is. And I don't disagree. Kelly, there's a song out there that some lawyers made famous, the Shut the F Up song. I agree. Always the number one answer is to what I tell people is don't say anything. But here's the deal. I wouldn't be in business if everybody said nothing. And not to say that I want business, it's that people don't follow that advice and they think that they're smarter. And I mean no offense to anybody watching. And here's the thing. It's kind of like if I do have I bought a CBD cartridge and it's in my car. Granted, I'm a lawyer and I, do this for a living. But if I have a CBD cartridge, and it kind of goes to what Jax is saying, if I don't have the packaging, but let's say I just bought it a couple of days ago, I know it's in my recycle bin at my house, and you followed my advice and took a picture of the thing. If it's different than a DWI advice, because when people are DWI, they've potentially been drinking and they're, if you're not stoned, you're sober, you don't have, all you have is this CBD cartridge. It's hard to tell a person to not say anything when you're driving through Hayes County with it, because you're going to get your car towed. You're going to go to jail. You might miss work the next day. There's no PR bonds down there, as you well know, or very rarely. Love Judge Prado, but not all that often.
Actually, we have a new system where you get a PR bond and they make you pee in a cup once a month. If you get arrested in Hayes County, hire a bondsman. Don't take the PR bond, because
same in Wilco, same in Wilco. You'll get the pretrial release, but you're peeing. I've had clients switch over to sureties. I understand.
So I kind of want to agree with you about the distinction between CBD and other things, but I would not engage in that type of talk as oh no, Delta 8 is legal. I'm not telling some 25-year-old cop that Delta 8 is legal.
Right. Yeah.
I'm admitting I know what it is.
Especially when there's already like kind of conversation as to if that is really true or not. So I think everybody proceed with the utmost of caution.
Right. That's like saying I know my rights.
Agreed.
Inviting him to arrest you.
On the Delta 8 one, I don't know. It's kind of like with another example I use is in like an aggravated assault type case or whatever. If I could tell my client, just tell him you defended yourself. Just say that. Because then I later don't have to put my client up on the stand. I can play the video and I can say, look, he's been saying he was defending himself the whole time. So
you can get that it's Delta 8 admitted into evidence if you said that on your video.
Right.
That's Delta 8. But I wouldn't engage in any kind of argument.
I agree. I'm just, it's hard. I have clients who come in and they're like, but Fox, I was going to lose my car. I was going to lose my job. I have nobody in Texas to bond me out, nobody that owns property to post a surety. And so look, shut up and don't say anything is always the number one rule. But in those very select circumstances, you're not actually breaking the law. I feel like the group that is here that cares to learn about this stuff, they know well enough whether or not what they have is legal or not. Now, if you don't know, don't say you don't know and don't say anything. But if you got Delta 8, you just bought it. You have CBD, you just bought it. Or, you have a way to prove it. And I know it's hard to think about those things on the fly. I know I'm an attorney, so I think about it differently. It's just hard to say, don't say anything, because I've had prosecutors point to the video and say, well, if it wasn't, why didn't your client say something? And there's case law that says that they can do that. So that's
you can eliminate that out. That's a comment on their 6th Amendment right and their 5th Amendment right.
So
I agree. It's complex. But if you're in the field, you have no power, zero. True. There are guys with guns, dogs, helicopters, radios, and you can't win that question unless you just bumped into a cop who didn't feel like arresting you.
Yeah. Right. And part of what's sort of unfair about that whole thing in terms of us trying to give advice, we're Texas NORML, Facebook is worldwide. Things are very different just in Hayes and Travis, right? I mean, extremely different. Right. To some extent, I think Kelly's advice is more of a Hayes County thing. I'll go here. I think we're beyond this now. By the way, there are some questions about Hayes versus Travis and sort of what the what's happening right now. I see those sorts of things. So, I mean, in Travis County, you're extremely likely to not get, assuming there are no other offenses being committed and it's a misdemeanor amount of marijuana, you're extremely likely to get a maximum of just a ticket, which would still theoretically, if that part happens, subject you to Class B regular Texas punishment. But what actually happens when you show up at the Justice of the Peace is you find out you don't have to hire a lawyer. You don't have to give us your fingerprints. You don't even, so you're not even going to need an expunction for this. Just come back with this silly class done, not even any community service. Case goes away. Obviously was, I mean, you know,
and city council directed them not to spend any funding on any THC testing or arresting.
and
So in theory, you might not even get arrested unless
Right,
you know the
right.
cop's in a bad mood.
and here's where I'm going with this. I still think this is a little bit less likely now, but because they're leaving them alone so much. In Travis County, it was common for years for police officers say, and not be lying, hey, I don't want to take 30 minutes to search your car. If you tell me where it is, I'll give you a ticket. And then if they felt like the person harassed them, they do what any cop does and gets miffed about it. And then my client goes to jail when they didn't need to. Now, is that something that we can give advice about in terms of how to handle it? I would say in Travis County, you know, if a police officer actually says that to you, I mean, if he's lying, he's going to arrest you anyway, I guess, right? I mean, he's, you know, so I just, in that very specific 1 out of 254 counties in Texas, you know, I could sort of give that advice. I think that's probably true for Harris County as well, and a lot of the big municipalities, and just totally not true for Kelly and Hayes County. So
And I just illustrate that by telling you that our judges and our legal authorities refer to Travis County as the People's Republic of Austin. And I mean, it's almost like you know, that whole own the libs motivation for the craziness. It's almost a little bit of that. Like, we need to be harsh to show that we are not them. So we turn up being the Eighth Reich instead of the People's Republic of Hayes County. But we did go 58-42 Democrat at the last election. So I do believe that's going to change here. And I mean, I'm strongly thinking about running for DA myself. If that happens, that's going to dramatically change here.
Well, it's good that DAs do have some discretion and police departments do as well to a certain extent. But I've got actually quite a few questions that I have been taking notes on from Facebook. So if we could kind of pivot to some of the Q&A. There are a few kind of clarifying questions that I think we'll knock out first. So, you know, what are the familiar names for concentrates? So it's not just a vape cartridge, right? It's not just dabs or shatter or all of those types of things. It's a brownie, it's a tincture, it's a salve, a gummy, it's anything that's not flour. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but technically if you have like a grinder that has a keef catch, you've now manufactured keef hashish, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. In an aggressive prosecuting jurisdiction, absolutely. They can,
Yeah.
I think I have a harder time with that one, but I agree.
I
I've
do too.
seen it.
I think
Have you ever seen
the
it
proof
done?
there's going to be tough, but yes, I mean, it's
supposed to go through a chemical process, if I'm not mistaken, of some sort, even like by adding heat and just the shaking of it. I've never seen it done, but I agree. It is technically it's a concentrate, but by these legal, I mean, if you look at these Texas definitions, they're ridiculous. But I don't know if under that Texas definition, if it, I actually, I pulled it. It's 481.103 of the Health and Safety Code, and I don't. Oh wait, is this? I might be mixing up my definitions, but I don't know that it with for concentrates that they get there because resinous extractives, I guess. I don't know what those, they would have to, I don't know that those terms are specifically defined. So you would have to have I think it's pretty smart DA to get a keef prosecution for a POCS.
And there's also,
unless they're only doing it for show, right? They don't need to win. They just need to look tough. I wanted to make a point about what you were saying, Jax, in that you were talking about brownie, it's the weight of the thing. So even if you took some, say, THC tincture and put it in a 2-liter bottle of soda, they'd weigh the soda bottle. They would weigh the 2-liter bottle of soda. So it's,
And really the only
dilution.
reason we don't see more of those, 2-liter bottle of soda cases is that fortunately it's much more difficult for law enforcement. I mean, if law enforcement has some legal cause to bust into your house, a lot of times if there's brownies on the counter, they're not going to know, what kind of brownies they are. There are obviously cases where they have confidential informants before, they suspect you of dealing, or that they know from other people that you've been selling brownies and those sorts of things. But just from a practical standpoint, we don't see a whole lot of this, but goodness gracious, when it happens,
Thunderbolt.
0 to 1 grams is a state jail felony. That's 1 to 4 is a 3rd degree. More than 4 is a 2nd degree. 4 grams is nothing. You can't add concentrates to anything really and keep it under 4 grams. You can, but you understand what I'm saying. That's 2 to
A lot of people talk
years.
about that Lavoro case out of Williamson County, how they weighed all of that stuff. And, I worked on that with some people, and he's got like another 1.5 years and he'll be off probation, but he was facing 99 years. And it's still, 7 years
right?
He had to be on probation.
Yeah, he took a felony deferred. He took a felony deferred, that guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Kelly, a Hayes County case, an example, a guy was sitting the marijuana, just regular marijuana, in alcohol to then drain it. And then I think that's how they were creating some hashish type product. Hayes County charged him with the weight of the rubbing alcohol for which the marijuana was sitting in a bottle that had already been used, and then he turned it into the sticky stuff next to it, and they charged him the weight of that. So it was like so much.
Dude, if you sauteed some flour and some butter to make brownies with, they'd charge you with the weight of the skillet.
In Hayes,
well, and also a lot of people are asking, like, why are concentrates illegal? Like, how did that happen? And I think that there's some important context there that, in 1997, everyone was wanting to be hard on crime then, right? That was kind of like the popular thing. And so there was a whole bunch of penalties for, like, extra hard for crack cocaine, extra hard for, meth. And they did the same with concentrates, treating it similar to that. And so in 1997, it was one of those escalating bills that changed it to be a felony. So that's very unfortunate. That's the case, because a lot of patients use concentrates. It's a more effective uptake method for them. And so it's just frustrating.
That's all in line with Nixon's initial plan, right? I mean, that's just carrying it forward. And we're still doing it. It's crazy. Hopefully we'll turn around soon.
And hey, Jax, can I, one thing?
Yeah, and they were asking.
I was just going to say one thing that one of the questions earlier, and so I circled and wrote and I forgot to answer. One thing that I've seen them starting to do, that CBD, the way that they're preventing people from using it is they're making it a specific condition on probations and things like that. So that the way that they're preventing you from claiming, this was just an issue I wanted to mention because I've started to see it. I argued against it when my clients were testing positive and they couldn't prove it. And now we argue, they figure out what we're arguing about, and then they fix it. So now the probation paperwork in multiple counties that I practice in specifically states that you cannot use CBD because though your psychoactive THC may not show up in a P test, because the CBD is going to have the metabolite show up in your urine test that you're doing every month, that I have to have my clients go do for a reset in Hayes County. No joke.
So, Mykal, there is going to be, I think, a bill that's going to address, so they can't dictate how private companies decide to drug test, but I think there is going to be conversation about state employees. So, teachers, law enforcement, first responders, all these people, over-the-counter hemp products are legal. And they're not being able to use it because THC is continuing to be tested. So why don't we save the money and let people use the over-the-counter products instead of just saying, hey, no, you don't get to have this whole realm of therapy available to you because you choose to work for the state. And just to clarify, a couple of people are kind of differing on what the percentage is of the THC for a hemp product. They're saying that it's 1% or, no, it is 0.3% THC is what is legal hemp. That has not changed at all. If your product has 0.3%, then you are legal to have it. And if you are an enrolled patient in the Texas Compassionate Use Program, well, then you get 0.5% THC, buddy.
Party time.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that the licensees have become creative in their formulations to try to bring better products to their patients. So happy to see that. So the smokable hemp ban, I'm not sure if you guys have been following that, but people are asking for some updates regarding the hemp ban. There is, as far as I know, the next hearing is later this month, I believe on the 22nd, and that will be, I guess, where the next decisions are made. I'm not really sure, maybe y'all could tell me a little bit more about what would be happening in that, but that will be when we know more, is later in March.
I'm not up on the most recent, I know nobody follows that ban in Travis County. You can walk into, as I pointed out, you can walk into any store right now and get yourself as much of the smokable hemp flower that you would like. So,
Oh, well, they are allowed to continue to sell those products on their shelf until the decision is made. That was the verdict of the judge, was that they could continue to sell smokable. So it's like the pre-rolled, the vape cartridges, things that are marketed as being a smoking product.
Yeah, I thought that the statute.
So another question is, yeah. There's a couple of questions about home grow. So the question is, are there any questions about home grow? What are the laws for them in Texas? Home grow is not legal in Texas. There is.
I would say if you own your home, you won't after they catch you with your home grow.
Right. Now, there are, you can get a license to grow hemp. So there are some abilities to do hemp if you would like to go through the licensing with the Texas Department of Agriculture and make sure that everything is compliant. You can grow hemp products. Usually it's not in the home. Usually it is, an area restricted for that. There's some regulations having to do with that. But if you're now, unless you have a license from TDA for low THC hemp products, you are not growing legally. I just want you to know that.
And one thing I found in helping some friends start a small CBD company in the middle of the CBD splash was you cannot manufacture any type of CBD product in Texas. So that's in that range of that 443.202. It's not that one, but near there.
Smokable, Mykal. You can dry the flower and you can create gummies, but you cannot manufacture a smokable product, I believe is the case.
You cannot sell any product that is manufactured in Texas. You follow that statute to the agricultural code, and the agricultural code states that manufacture is literally defined as even putting the label on the bottle. So we were going to sell, we are selling now legally, the 1,000 milligram drop bottles with, the oil mixed with the CBD and all that stuff. We have a whole bunch of them, right? But the idea initially, until they brought me on, was to bring in the isolate into Texas, which is legal. You can buy it by the kilo, fine white powder that then you heat up and mix with the oil, and then you can put a label on it and sell it. I'm fairly confident that that's what folks here in Texas are doing, because that's how you would make money, because the other people that are trying to do it legally, the profit margins are so much smaller because you're having to ship in white labeled product according to the statute as it's written now, unless you get licensed to do what you're talking about. So even manufacturing it for distribution in Texas, just putting the label on it. If you got the bottle from Colorado and then put your label on it, technically, and then tried to distribute it here, that's illegal.
I'm going to have to read back up on that because I think I might be under a misunderstanding there.
Double check me.
This is an interesting thing. Oh, I trust you. You've got a dad, which a lot of people in the comments were shouting out to your dad for that graphic, by the way.
Cool.
So this is something that I found really interesting. You know, people talk about having to check the box with employment stuff. So what type of charges can be seen by your employer or in a background check? So if you get pulled over for possession of flour, can they see that? If you get, you know, pulled over and arrested for possession of a felony for concentrates, can they see that? What is visible?
I'll take a stab at that one. This is a good question. It comes up all the time. Really, the first thing to understand in this situation is that there is no such thing as your criminal record. And by that, I mean, even this far after 9/11, there's not a central database where it's easily accessible and everything is known. It is still a huge mishmash of different government agencies. And the different government agencies perform different functions. For example, if you got a ticket in Travis County, then, you know, Austin Police Department would be a government agency that would have a record that one of their officers gave you that ticket, and JP5, Justice of the Peace number 5, where you're sent to, would have a record of it. But for example, the Travis County Jail would not, because you were never sent to jail. Now, what if that APD officer had used his discretion to take you to jail? Really extremely uncommon in Travis County, but I'm just saying hypothetically, or if that happened in a different county, well, then that Travis County jail or that Hayes County jail would have a record of it. So it sounds flippant, but the first response to that question is always, it depends on how the prospective employer is looking. You can make some reasonable guesses about how that would be. If you Google criminal background search, you will find, I don't know if it's hundreds now, it seems like hundreds of companies that want to sell you your neighbor's criminal history and all those sorts of things. Well, the more reputable ones of those, the only good news here is that to the extent that some of those have become somewhat reputable, they have a good reputation because they theoretically have accurate records. How do they do that? For the most part, many of them for Texas state records, which is what we would be talking about, you know, minor marijuana charges. Those would be at, if there is a central database for them in Texas, it's the DPS criminal division that keeps them. And DPS sells those records. And that's where most of the publicdata.com and all those sorts of folks get their information. So
they're data mining and making money off of people's records. That makes me feel very warm and fuzzy.
They're not extorting. There's a whole business there. There's a structural constitutional issue here. While your case is pending, it's always visible because we don't have secret criminal proceedings apart from grand juries. We don't have secret police. I mean, when it's happening to you, it feels terrible. But if you're just looking at the system, you want pending criminal cases to be visible to everybody. Otherwise, they could just hide people away and we'd never hear from them again, as happens in some places. So while it's pending, it's always visible. Once it's over, the result of that case is held in the respective clerk's office, either the county clerk or the district clerk, depending on if a misdemeanor or felony. And it's publicly available unless and until you can expunge it. And when you do that, that's an order from the court to all the agencies that might have a record of it to destroy that record, which is a great result in any criminal charge.
Yeah. And so Chester is also asking about, you know, the current Texas Compassionate Use Program has 3 licensees that are allowed to sell and produce medical marijuana. So he wants to know, you know, will the legislator allow more than these 3 licenses? So there was a period last October where DPS for 1 week opened up applications saying that they were going to take on new licensees. And at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, they took it down. It was scandal. It was all this craziness. But essentially, the statute says a minimum of 3 licenses. So DPS has only done the minimum. At any time, they can open it up for more licensing. But here's the issue. Because of the THC cap and because some of the limitations regarding condition lists, there is only about 3,000 to 4,000 patients that are currently enrolled in the program. So that is problematic in allowing the program to grow. That's a very small pool. And as I'm sure a lot of people know, you know, licensing fees are almost $2 million every 2 years. So it's very expensive. So hopefully this year, whenever we are able to raise that THC cap and add more symptoms and conditions, that will open up the pool and open up the possibilities for more people to become licensees.
So that's DPS agency discretion to increase the number of licenses?
Yes.
One of my friends who owns a hemp farm here, owns hemp spot here in Texas, was telling me that one of the things that they had talked about at, I guess, a meeting, I guess, I don't know where he talked about it and who specifically, I didn't ask, but the idea is that folks that are growing hemp, the reason that they're wanting, I mean, it's Texas, first of all, we live in a police state, so there's that. Then secondly, just if you think about it and take it to the nth degree, the reason why they're being so, tight with it, amongst many things, money probably being the number one as well. But if you're growing a large quantity of hemp, there's the regulation of, well, is it hemp? Is it marijuana? Then they're plants, right? So it's not like it's Mr. Plant, you don't have any more than this amount of THC or otherwise you're going to get, in trouble. So you have these plants that are, growing, and what control do these folks have? How is it manipulated? This particular friend has seeds that have been genetically modified, but that doesn't mean that there's not something that flies from his next door neighbor, depending on who he lives next to, over into his farm and cross-pollinate, yada yada yada. Take that even further, then you take that hemp and you're extracting whatever you're going to extract from it, the CBD or whatever. Then when you do that process, where are you going to do it? One, it's going to have to be a DPS or state regulated plant of some sort, because you also have to keep in mind you're going to create byproduct that is otherwise illegal. So when we were just talking about it, just bull crap. Can I say shitting? Bullshitting. He was telling me that at least that's what they tell him is their concern about releasing the hounds, so to speak, and letting more and more people have these, is they don't believe that all the laws will be followed, complied with. How do they enforce?
Well, here's the deal. Like, they were saying that about CBD and hemp. And I mean, I think everyone probably saw what happened in Corpus Christi recently, where allegedly there was a shop that was selling forfeit high THC cookies cartridges, and they were caught and they were arrested. Now, I would rather that not be the case, but the fact of the matter is that the regulations did what they were supposed to do and kept someone from selling a fraudulent item to people. So, I mean, if you want to keep letting it be the wild, wild west, like, go right on ahead. But drug dealers don't ID, and they probably, don't mold and test their cannabis. So if we're really concerned about public safety, looking at what happened with Valley before of all of the COVID stuff was happening, then we have to really move forward with allowing there to be a legal market so that consumers have a way to address their grievances, and that people are held accountable for what they are selling, that it has to have what's on the label, has to be in it. You can't lie about that, right? So I think that's really important. And so Jamie Spencer, Randall would like to know, do you practice in Nueces County?
I don't, but if you reach out to contact me, and I'm contactable out there, I can try to find somebody. Do either of y'all know somebody? At any rate, you could contact me afterwards.
What's the county seat in Nueces?
Is it Nueces Corpus?
Is it?
I think so. So Kyle Holscher would be down there then.
Yes,
the guy you were talking about, Mykal.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
Yeah. So Randall, look into Kyle Holscher down there in Nueces County. And then also, real quick, guys, I want to talk about a few of the bills that would address these concentrate issues that we're talking about. Currently, there are 3 bills that would address this. There's 2 House bills and 1 Senate bill. So Representative Thompson has authored HB 169, which would not only reduce the penalty for possession of flower, but it would also reduce the penalty for 1 gram of concentrate or less. Now, as you guys probably know, those vape cartridges come in half gram and gram, iterations. And so that is a very small amount, but it would be a step forward. Representative Canales from the Rio Grande Valley area has also authored HB 439, which again, deals with flowers and concentrates, a little bit more of an in-depth bill there. And this is, I believe, the second or third time that he's authored a bill in this manner. And then we've also got Senator Johnson in the Senate, SB 151, dealing with concentrates. It helps kind of like more accurately define what concentrates are, and then scales back the charges at multiple levels. So I think it's just important to know that these bills have been filed. I also want to make sure that everybody knows that bills have started to be assigned to committees, which is great. I think it's of note that last session, the Lieutenant Governor did not allow any marijuana bills to be assigned to any committees because he is who is in control of that. And as of an alert that I got today, multiple bills in the Senate have been assigned to multiple committees. So we've already done better than last session in the Senate, even though, of course, 2 bills did pass out of that chamber, even though Lieutenant Governor said that there would be 0. So we have work to do addressing concentrates and other issues, but there is a action alert page on the Texas NORML website. Go to texasnormal.org, click the 87th Ledge tab. All the bills are there for you to look at, 3 different action alerts for you to participate in, and there's also a way to submit your testimony. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows about that. A lot of people are asking about, like, what is the likelihood of what's going to happen? I mean, I think you guys have probably also kind of been following what's happening at the Capitol. A lot of offices are working almost completely virtually. It's a lot of a different landscape there this session, but we are having a lot of success engaging virtually. I think that the medical program will definitely be improved this session. I think we have a really strong chance at decriminalization, and more of a chance than ever before for a regulated cannabis market for 21 and up. If you'd asked me, right after we got the budget from the comptroller where it said that we had a huge deficit, I was like, oh, they're going to want anything that's like a positive fiscal note. And then it ended up, being mitigated and not being quite as much as they thought it would be. And I was like, oh, well, that takes a little out of the sales. Well, now this winter storm fiasco has happened, and they're estimating that it's going to be more costly than Harvey. So we have a lot of things that need to be paid for, and revenue from taxes and licensing fees is one way, but also we can save a lot of money by not continuing to prosecute people. I mean, $311 million just for these low-level offenses. It doesn't even take into account, over an ounce or concentrates. So much more than that could be saved. So I just wanted to riff on that for a second, let people know some expectations, some bills to follow. I do anticipate that we will probably start seeing hearings for our bills towards the end of March, beginning of April, depending on how things go. The governor has been pretty clear that he has these, legislative items that need to be addressed in the first 60 days before they move on to anything else. So it's going to be a wild ride, you guys. It's only 140 days. And we're already 50 days into it. So on that note, I do not see any other questions. Did you guys want to maybe share some final thoughts or any last words? Sounds kind of morbid, so I'm not going to say that.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Kelly and Mykal for being here, and Jax, you as well, always as usual. And if you two have any final thoughts, that's great. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks for everyone being here and supporting this movement. As was said earlier, we are in the right at the end of the day, and it's great to be able to participate in a crusade for something that really is right, that will change the world for the better. And so I appreciate everyone for whatever they do in terms of just making sure that we get rid of these terrible laws.
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. It was fun, and good night to everybody.
I echo those sentiments.
Okay, well, you guys are going to have to come back another time. Everybody really has enjoyed. I've been having fun watching the comments. I was hoping that there would be your dad jokes, but really they just were very kind and loving towards him. So you got lucky, Mykal. Also, no one said anything about your name.
I took the J out because I didn't want all the Facebook comments about my name being Michael J. Fox.
Awesome. Well, it's good to see all you guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the call then. So everybody have a great night.